By the time we got to Nepal, I was fine, and I hiked for 3 weeks and up to 5,500 meters. I thought I was never, ever going to do anything like that again. There's a picture of me hiking in Nepal and just this moment of I have my life back.
Welcome to The Story Behind the Symptoms, a podcast from symptomatic.me. Your host is David Clark, MD, a board-certified gastroenterologist who successfully diagnosed and treated over 7,000 patients with neuroplastic pain or illness. Each episode, we dive into our guests' life experiences to uncover the deeper causes of their symptoms. By listening to their story, you will gain insights that advance your own journey towards knowledge that becomes healing.
Hello, and welcome to the Story Behind the Symptoms podcast. I am your host, Dr. David Clark, president of the ATNS, and on this podcast, we talk to guests who have suffered neuroplastic symptoms about what those symptoms were and how they were overcome, and we get into a little bit of the roots of where those symptoms might have come from. My guest today is Ty Kuncio. Why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. As you said, my name is Ty Kuncio. I am American, but I live in Nairobi, Kenya. I've been living in East Africa since 2018. And moving here was kind of a big part of my pain journey, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But I am now a chronic pain recovery coach, and I see people online all over the world. But yeah, my story is a little unique, so I'm hoping that it will be helpful to some of your listeners, because I know how hard it is to feel like you're the only one out there who's experiencing what you are. And I still haven't met anyone who's had anything remotely like I did.
Yeah, there's certainly millions of people that have migraines or back pain or irritable bowel or fibromyalgia, but there are also millions of people who have something that, as far as they can tell, nobody else has. And the common denominator is that their physicians are not able to find an organ disease or structural damage to explain it. And that common denominator strongly implies that the symptoms are neuroplastic, but they can happen all over the body. I mean, one of my patients, for example, had 3 years of itching of his skin over his entire body. He's the only patient I've ever seen with that particular symptom, but it was absolutely neuroplastic and responded exceedingly well to the neuroplastic recovery therapy. Well, why don't we start at the beginning with what your symptoms were and how long ago they started and what the course of it was from there?
Sure. So the thing that finally led me to this work, to this world, was a knee surgery that I had in 2014. Looking back, I had many neuroplastic symptoms before that. I just didn't know it. And a lot were when I was in my 20s and was really struggling with putting pressure on myself to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I just didn't really realize that that's what was going on. But anyway, so this relatively minor knee surgery I had in 2014, but it required me to be completely off my leg, no weight on it for 8 weeks. And they also gave me a nerve block, which caused my leg to be completely numb for about 5 days after the surgery. And they did that because I had reacted badly, meaning I had lingering neuroplastic symptoms, to a previous, even less invasive knee surgery that I had had on the other knee about 4 years earlier. And they seemed to think that if they just numbed the leg, then nothing would go wrong. Nothing, I wouldn't freak out. My brain wouldn't overreact like it did in the first knee surgery, which everybody couldn't figure out why that happened either. And I had a surgery in 2010 that I ended up with nerve shooting pains down both my legs, and for years. Eventually it went away.
Down both of your
legs. Both legs. Yeah. So they were I was really hesitant to have another surgery because of that experience, but the pain had gotten quite bad. It was keeping me from just doing normal things. And so I decided to have this surgery. And I don't know, maybe I needed it, maybe I didn't. Who knows at this point, but I'm going to go with I did need it just to make myself feel better about it. So I followed the protocol for recovery to a T, because I was just so scared of what had happened last time I had surgery. And everything seemed okay until I started to put weight on the leg again. And I was going to physical therapy, and I had this one episode when I was on a leg press machine, and they just had my legs fully straight, and they just asked me to slowly bend them, and both legs together. doing that. And basically what happened was my knee just locked. The one that had the surgery, it locked. It wouldn't let me bend it. And I had excruciating pain as I tried to do that. My theory at this point is that my brain had decided that that was a dangerous movement. And I am never going to let you do that again, basically. And so from that moment on, my recovery just went sideways. It's like my leg almost, I tell people it forgot how to walk. It forgot how to function normally. Even when I had other people try to move my leg, it was unconsciously guarding, bracing, I couldn't get it to relax so that they could easily move it. I went to every kind of doctor, every kind of gait specialist. They thought there was maybe nerve damage, but no one could find evidence of that. I had intense pain. And even though MRIs, everything showed that surgery was a, quote, success. So I was at one point.
What did the doctors tell you was wrong? Because these symptoms make no sense at all physiologically. I mean, you had surgery on the knee, but now it's the muscles that are causing a problem, and you haven't had any damage to the muscles. They have some explanation for this? I mean, trying to make these symptoms fit into the category of organ disease or structural damage is literally impossible. And if they had even the tiniest idea of a brain to body connection, they would have made that connection.
I don't really remember them even trying to come up with an explanation. It was just like they were more focused on the pain that I was having in my knee and less about what the rest of my leg was doing, because I think they probably assumed that it was just reacting to the pain in my knee, I guess. I'm not sure, but it was...
Clearly they were not sure either.
No, they definitely weren't.
Not sure
I'm pretty sure some of them did say, I don't know, but most of the time they just sent me to someone else, sent me to a pain management, or sent me to... I eventually did see a neurologist who seemed to know. He actually told me, do not have a nerve conduction study. He's like, I know it's going to be negative or not going to show that you have any nerve damage. Just based on examining you, you have no nerve damage. And it's just going to be excruciatingly painful for you. So I'm glad that he said that, because I never actually had it done. So I avoided that at least. But I mean, I was doing at one point 4 hours of physical therapy a day. I went on disability leave from work. I tried every treatment under the sun. I flew to Canada in the winter for 2 weeks to see some specialist there who used some kind of lasers. I tried special pants that had sensors on them that would connect with your phone, and then it would tell you which muscles you were using, and was trying to teach my brain how to use the muscles correctly again. And honestly, It was a physical therapist who wasn't even trained in this work, who was the first to kind of figure out that fear was a huge component in this. And there was this moment where he had me walking, and I went to him because he was a gait specialist. So he had this technology where you could put sensors on your leg, and then he would videotape you, and he could see what the sensors were doing, and then could tell you, okay, you're doing this wrong. Let's try this, that kind of thing. That's not what I needed, because that was actually
everything so far is fully focused on your body.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Not one of these clinicians had any idea that a brain to body condition, a neuroplastic condition, could be responsible for this, and in fact was by far the most likely explanation for something like this that has no basis in human physiology related to muscles and joints.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, it was really this one physical therapist who, I don't know how he came up with this, because he wasn't trained in this, but I think he just eventually realized that I was so scared of using my leg in certain ways that I needed something drastic to kind of give me this aha moment that I was okay. And so I was on a treadmill walking with him, and just one day he just pushed a button on the treadmill, and he's like, okay, run. And he just made it go faster. I had no choice. And I started running, and I had no pain whatsoever while I was running. And I'm a runner, was a runner, am again a runner. In my head, I'm a runner. And so I was just elated. I was so happy. I was just like, oh my God, is this really happening? And he pushed it, came back to walk. And I went back to my weird, funny way of walking, pain came back, but it just became very evident, obviously, right there that brain, fear, all of that was involved. And so slowly started investigating this kind of work. I think my first exposure was actually a book called The Brain's Way of Healing. And that kind of opened the door for me. In that book, I learned about a doctor who happened to be in my area called Dr. Michael Moskowitz. And he has a unique take on neuroplasticity. Is a little bit different from the stuff that PRT is all about. But it was a way in. It was a way to start thinking about what's going on here, and led me to Curable and Alan Gordon stuff. And then I eventually worked with a couple people at the Pain Psychology Center.
Let me back up for a moment. Did the physical therapist who saw you run reach the conclusion that this was a brain-to-body condition that you had? Because there really is no other explanation. If you had a muscle joint nerve problem, there's no way that you would have been able to run. How did he or
yes,
she
but
explain?
He didn't know what to do about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he was really focused on finding ways to help me not be so scared. So he would, stand behind me and push me and just like make me react. I hated that exercise. But so he was trying to find his own way of dealing with my fear, but he didn't know how. He was just kind of experimenting. So eventually I moved on to someone who did, but he was the first one to kind of figure out like, there's no exercise, physical exercise other than dealing with this fear in your head that I can give you that is going to make you walk again or make you walk normally again. So he figured that out, but I don't think he knew what to do with it. He didn't know what to do with it. Yeah.
So what were the ideas from Dr. Moskowitz's book that helped you the most, would you say? What was the concept there that was useful for you?
Well, so the book wasn't Dr. Moskowitz's. There was a chapter in that book about Dr. Moskowitz, and that's kind of how I looked him up. And then I started seeing him. I became a patient of his, and he does have his own workbook, and he does a lot of like visualization of the brain. He focuses a lot on like visualizing shrinking the pain centers in the brain and stuff like that. I didn't respond too much to his theories, his strategies, I guess you would call them, but they opened the door to this world of neuroplasticity. And so I kind of latched on more to Alan Gordon's work and Lorimer Moseley and those kinds of people. And I was definitely not a book here. This was not like oh my God, this makes sense and I'm cured. It still took a really long time for me to get back to, whatever you would call normal. But for me, at least, the fear of the symptoms themselves was the biggest issue. And I'm sure that it was perpetuated by, personality traits, perfectionism, putting pressure on myself. And I find, obviously that's a pretty common pattern for a lot of people in this world. But for me, being an athlete was who I was. And it was one of the biggest ways I had excelled. And it made me feel good about myself. And that was taken away from me. So it was like this big threat to my identity, to what made me, feel worthy, feel good. So that was something. But one physical therapist, I eventually worked with a different physical therapist, and she wasn't trained in this work specifically, but she worked with stroke victims. And so she was neurologically trained, and she had me doing the things that scared me while she would ask me things like, name fruits that start with the letter M, or, she would give me like complicated math problems to do in my head or she would give me like a string to untie, something to just focus my brain on something else while I was doing some kind of exercise that I thought caused me pain or scared me or whatever it was that was causing my symptoms. And obviously at this point, I know distraction isn't a good long-term strategy when it comes to this stuff, but it provided more of these aha moments where I was like, oh my God, I just did that. And I wasn't able to do that 10 minutes ago, but just because I was naming fruits that started with M, I was able to do it. And
and all these things tell you that the brain is responsible for the condition. Being able to run on the treadmill when you couldn't walk, that tells you the brain is involved. And the ability to overcome your symptoms when you're distracted. I mean, only the brain can be responsible for that because obviously your knee is not distracted.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So
Definitely.
how long did it take for you to recover from your symptoms?
It's a really good question. And I'm not sure if I know exactly because it was such a long process. But I got to a point where I felt like I was probably 75% there. And my husband and I, we were living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and we had been planning on moving to East Africa for at least a year and a half to 2 years, but I kept delaying going because I wasn't ready, because I thought I needed to be near Western medicine. I needed my doctors. I needed my physical therapists. Like I couldn't move. We were going to move to Uganda. That was where we were planning on going. And because he had a job. And so he was flying back and forth. And it was this physical therapist, the one that was giving me these exercises to do, these distraction exercises to do, who eventually said to me, I think you need to move to Africa. She said, you don't need me anymore. You don't need doctors anymore. And I think it would be really good for you to get out of this rut. You're living in a house where you were on disability leave and you were like housebound for many, many months. And everything in your life revolves around this pain. And you need something new and challenging and exciting. And she said that to me, and I was just like, I was not ready quite yet. It took me still a little bit of time. But eventually when I got to, like I said, probably about 75%, I said, okay, let's do it.
All right.
What do I have to lose?
Very scary with still 25% problem. So off you go to Africa. What happens then? I
improved more in like the 3 or 4 months after we moved to Uganda than I had in like 3 or 4 years prior to that. And I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't doing any physical therapy. I wasn't doing any of the things that I had been doing prior to moving. It was just the belief that I was okay, the confidence that I could get better. I could survive in Uganda and I didn't need my doctors anymore. I had everything I needed here with myself, that I was okay and that I had proved that. And that was a huge catapult for me to recovery.
At some point, you must have concluded that, you know what, this is not my knee, this is not the nerves, this is not the muscles. When, in relation to your recovery, do you think you reached that conclusion?
Probably around the time I decided that I was ready to move to Africa, because there was a period of time where I was still doing the PT, like the 4 hours of physical therapy, even though I was learning about this other stuff. And I had kind of both my one foot in each camp. And that was not a real great place to be, because I was still reinforcing the idea that I needed to get stronger. I needed to physically strengthen my leg or whatever else I needed in order to get better. And until I finally said, no, I don't need to do any of that stuff anymore, I think that was kind of the thing that finally made me like, okay, this is not something, the physical part of it is not necessary. And if anything, it's holding me back.
Yeah, this is such a difficult shift to make. You were doing 4 hours of physical therapy how often?
Every day.
Every day, 4 hours.
Every day. Yeah.
That speaks to a certain amount of intensity on your part,
yeah.
Ty. 4 hours is a lot, and clearly it wasn't working, but you were perseverating on it just the way your doctors were. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, clearly not.
Yeah.
You were determined. Okay, well, let's talk for a bit, as we always do on this podcast, about anything that you might have experienced as a girl, as a child, that might have contributed to the personality traits that you mentioned earlier, perfectionism and the just sheer intensity of your efforts to recover. 4 hours a day of physical therapy is not something that most people would be able to manage. Is there anything that you can recall growing up that might have contributed?
So I didn't have any big T traumas, as you could call them, but my parents weren't happy. They weren't happy with each other. They weren't happy in general. And it was a bit of an unpredictable environment. So I definitely know that led to some adaptive behaviors. Looking back, I think I was trying to keep others happy by being good, right? And of course that didn't work. It wasn't really people pleasing, but it was more of trying to do everything perfectly, being really conscientious to kind of keep the peace. And I think it was also more about control and perfectionism and pressure than it was about pleasing others. It was kind of like, well, if I just don't rock the boat and I do everything really, really well, people seem happier. So I'll just work on that. And I think I also thought that if I was good at everything, then kids would like me. The other kids would like me. And you can imagine how that worked out for me. Like I didn't really fit in. I felt really alone where I grew up. And I think that fueled my drive even more, especially once I started to get recognized for it. I felt loved when I was, presented with awards and accolades, even though, of course, that's not real love, but to a kid, it feels good.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're not getting a lot or enough love in the home environment. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I kept pushing myself in everything I did. I was valedictorian. I got into every Ivy League college I applied for, and I excelled in endurance sports. And so, that's where kind of the fear of the symptoms became so intense later, because it was like a threat to who I was, this thing that was so important to me. I also definitely don't remember having a lot of fun as a kid. I always thought that I was just serious, but I think looking back, I think I probably learned that I shouldn't have fun, because there were more important things to do. And so I couldn't relax enough to have fun and just allow myself to be a kid. So yeah, I think all of that kind of combined resulted in, the adaptive behaviors, or whatever you want to call them, defense mechanisms that other people call personality traits, that led me to be who I was, that kind of led to this. In my 20s, like I said, I had so many weird symptoms in my 20s, and my 20s were like, I had no idea what I was doing with my life. And there was a lot of this, like, what do my parents want me to do? Maybe I should do that. And then maybe I should do this. And then really thinking I should go back to grad school. There was a point I wanted to work for the FBI. I mean, there was just all of these things that I slowly started to realize I didn't want to do any of those things. I was just doing them because I felt like I should, like other people wanted me to.
Yeah, it's remarkable how you describe that. We could probably spend 5 or 10 minutes on every single sentence you just said, because it's so common in my patients to have had these kinds of experiences. When you're in an environment where you're trying to fix everything, when you're in an environment that resembles a minefield where some days everything is fine and other days something blows up, but you have to be constantly vigilant. When you're trying to be a peacemaker and you're regularly failing to achieve that, then children don't have that many options for how they can respond to an environment like that. And they focus on the needs of others. Maybe it's not strictly people pleasing, but they are definitely trying to be the best little kids they can be perfect, accomplish things. And when they don't solve the problems in their home, then they feel badly about themselves. They feel like they're not measuring up, or they're second rate, or in more extreme circumstances, they can feel worthless. And they have to take their emotions around this and stuff them somewhere. And when you stuff your emotions, then you are losing a vital signal about your place in the world. And it's impossible to make a valid career choice, something that's going to work for you if you don't have access to your emotions. It's impossible to choose a romantic relationship partner that is going to work for you if you don't have these emotions to tell you and clue you in about what's going on there. It's also common for people to choose relationship partners that have problems or needs or need lots of support, and the relationships end up being unbalanced, where you are giving a lot more than you are getting back from those individuals. And I've seen many of my patients that go through one relationship like that after another. And it takes a lot of learning once you're out of the home environment to figure out, who is Ty really? I mean, what is the essence of her? What does she want? What makes her happy? What doesn't? Those kinds of things take time to learn. And if you didn't get to learn them as a kid, you can still learn them as an adult, but it takes a while. And you also mentioned a really important skill, which is the ability to play. A child who is focused on solving problems in the household is directing their attention away from themselves, and consequently they're not learning what is an essential human skill, which is the ability to play, the ability to do something that has no purpose but your own joy. And I should ask, have you learned that at this point? Do you have regular activity that you indulge in that isn't about anybody else, that is just because you love it?
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress for sure, but I definitely do a lot more than I used to. I still have the habits, but sometimes I live in Nairobi now, and there's an amazing forest here in the middle of the city that there's monkeys and jackals and bushbuck, and it's amazing to have this in the middle of like this big city. And I love to go running there. And I still sometimes have to remind myself when I'm running that like, there's no one chasing me. I'm doing this because I love it. Put a smile on my face. And so I definitely have that. I also have a 4.5-year-old. And so that also helps me to be more playful and more present. Having a child around makes a big difference.
Yeah, children, especially of that age, are tremendous role models for this, because they're just, sitting there doing whatever seems like it's fun. And if it stops being fun, that's okay. They just move on to something else that they think is going to be fun. And they are learning those self-care skills, which are absolutely essential for people. We all need to take time where, everybody else is off the table and we're just focusing on our own needs. I used to play soccer on up to 3 different teams at a time. That was my personal stress reduction. But like I say, everybody needs that. And if you don't have that ability to play, then what often happens is people do more and more and more on behalf of others. And the only thing that stops them is when their body protests and says, you are not doing this anymore. You cannot add any more tasks to your list right now. We are going to force you to stop, whether it's the knee or the back or the migraines or the fatigue, whatever it is, the body is going to just put a stop to it until you learn, among other things, how to play. So it sounds like you're working on that. I should also add the intensity of the effort that you put in when you were a girl and an adolescent is another very common way that people react to a home situation where they are not feeling successful, that you can get successful outside of the home. And it can absolutely push people to some pretty remarkable levels. I still remember meeting a woman who had participated in the Leadville 100, which is a race in Colorado that takes place are you familiar with it? Mm-hmm. It takes place in Leadville, Colorado, which is at 10,000 feet elevation. Over 3,000 meters for our friends around the world. And you run 100 miles. She had done this. And it was, part of her reaction to an environment that made her feel less about herself than she should have. Were you a marathoner, or did you go beyond marathons? Or
my body wouldn't let me eventually. It was like, that's too much, but I wanted to at some point. But yeah, my brain wouldn't let me, or either however you want to put it. It was screaming, stop, right? But along those lines, I wanted to say that, the other big change for me was also with my work. And getting out of the rat race, is like, a lot of people call it. Like I worked at Google for 10 years before finally leaving the United States and eventually, deciding to get trained and start coaching others through this process. And I never felt emotionally connected to or passionate about work before, but I still excelled, and I still, did everything 150%. And I think getting out of that environment really helped me a lot as well. It was another reason why leaving the US was beneficial to me. Because it kind of helped shift my perspective around what's important, right? And I had noticed it before with other trips overseas that I had experienced. Where I'm like, I just feel better when I'm not there. And I find that with a lot of my American clients, they tend to be really driven, achievement oriented, and I think it's somewhat cultural. Obviously, it's not just Americans, but I find myself often having that conversation about what it's like to live in a place where you don't feel like you have to participate in that rat race, in making a ton of money and buying that car. And when everyone else seems to be in it, it's a lot harder to remove yourself from it. And so living here, it's definitely easier to feel more at ease in that sense and not quite be so intense, but also being really passionate and interested in what I'm doing now also helps as well. But I think that was another aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question that I think the answer will be obvious to everybody who's watching this, but I'm going to ask you anyway about the difference between the emotional rewards you got working at Google versus the emotional rewards you're getting from doing neuroplastic work now.
Emotional rewards working at Google. I'm not sure what those would be. I mean,
well, that answers the question, actually.
I mean, it's the kind of place where, they make your life very easy by giving you free food and free doctors and a gym and, whatever else you need in life. So you never go home and you don't have a life outside of work. And so they kind of trap you and they make you, oh, how could you ever leave kind of situation. And so it took a while for me to kind of get to that point where I was like, yeah, this isn't healthy.
And
but
the emotional rewards from the work you're doing now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love it. I love interacting with people and having that personal connection. And I mean, as much as it's hard to watch people and know that people are where I was 10 years ago or, 15 years ago, but knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel and giving that hope and sharing what I know and what has worked for me, it feels incredible and it gives me a purpose. And it's by far the best decision I ever made. And I really, truly value all of my clients and the relationships that I build with them. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's, your answer is, again, not a surprise to anyone watching this, but it clearly shows that you have a connection to your emotions today that you didn't have 10 years ago.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, I'm not sure I worked on that directly because I certainly see the impact of unexpressed emotions in my clients. And like over the last few years, it's, definitely in my 20s, but I feel like, and emotions weren't talked about in my family growing up. But now I actually find it quite hard to keep my emotions to myself, but I'm not sure if I consciously worked on that. I mean, I did work with a few people at the Pain Psychology Center and things like that, but the kinds of things that I do now, like EAET, emotional awareness and expression therapy, and journaling and things like that, I never did that actively myself. So I think it was just kind of organic that it kind of happened. But the self-compassion piece was definitely something that, I had to work on consciously. And, growing up, I think I learned that I was better off by myself and I didn't want to rely on other people. Like I didn't need other people because that was dangerous. That took time for me to break that for sure. My in early 30s, I said, I'm not getting married. I'm not having kids because I liked being on my own, or my brain was used to just taking care of myself and I didn't want to rely on anyone else. I don't think I really understood unconditional love. And I felt like if I was on my own, then I could just worry about myself and not let anyone in and not get hurt. But yeah, so the self-compassion piece was definitely not there at first.
Yeah,
I definitely had to work on that.
Yeah, when you don't have enough compassion growing up, it's very hard to have any compassion for yourself. But once you recognize that, you know what, actually, Ty is a pretty decent human being, and you start to feel that about yourself and feel your own value, then it's a foundation for the next step, which is that your emotions are valid and they can start to appear little by little. And there's a positive feedback loop that goes on that the more the emotions appear, that gives you that feedback about how you are in the world, and that helps you to have more self-compassion, which lets more emotions come through. And it's not surprising to me at all that they would grow organically over time like that, and that once you have them, it gives you that signal and you can feel worthy of unconditional love from somebody else. You know, you can, if you're growing up in an environment where you're not feeling worthy, then why would you have a mutually supportive relationship with someone else, especially if you don't deserve something like that? But once you reach a point of self-compassion and emotional expression, then somebody comes along and gives you that caring. You can actually believe that you're worthy of it, and makes a huge, huge difference. Because it perpetuates the self-compassion. Now you've got somebody else that is telling you things about yourself that maybe you haven't heard before. And after a while, you can actually believe them. And that, again, grows the self-compassion, grows the emotional awareness. And those are all such key pieces of the recovery journey. So are you still having any symptoms today, either in the knee or the walking or elsewhere?
So what I still get is, whenever I have a trip coming up, that's my thing. If I have, because my trips these days are always really active, either some kind of hiking or some kind of activity. And every single time, there is no trip that this doesn't happen. I get a new symptom the week leading up to the trip, to the point where my husband and I just laugh at it at this point. Sometimes it's like a physical thing in my foot. My husband and I were going to Nepal a few years ago, and we were in the airport flying to Nepal, and I couldn't walk to the bathroom because my foot was hurting so much. And I did have a few moments of panic. This was before I kind of knew everything I needed to do in that moment. I hadn't really internalized it yet. I was definitely not a coach yet. And my husband just tried to lower the stakes for me and just said, if we just have to sit in a hut on the mountain and read for 2 weeks, we will be fine and we will still have a good time, and the trip will still be amazing. And he kind of helped talk me down off the ledge. And by the time we got to Nepal, I was fine, and I hiked for 3 weeks and up to 5,500 meters. I thought I was never, ever going to do anything like that again. There's a picture of me hiking in Nepal and just this moment of I have my life back. But to answer your question, yeah, every time. The last trip I went, I got eye floaters right before the trip. And my husband's like, don't go to the doctor. They're going to go away.
Okay, yeah, your
And I
husband
didn't
sounds
go to the
like a
doctor.
very wise man
He's learned. Yeah.
But, I should say from our American viewers, 500 meters is 18,000 feet, which is very impressive for somebody that couldn't walk to the bathroom in the airport. So it's great, with so many of my patients, that they're able to use the symptoms when they flare up as just a signal that there's some emotion going on, and they can just start thinking about what that emotion might be and where it's coming from. Incredibly enlightening discussion. Thank you so much. Before we close, do you have any questions for me or anything else you'd like to add? And where can people reach you if they want to have you as a coach?
Yeah. My website is retrainyourchronicpain.com. I am based in Kenya, but I have clients all over the world. Ideal time zones are obviously Europe, Australia. I do have some American clients, but it's quite limited just because of the time zone difference. And I have a 4.5-year-old, so I don't want to work every night. So I have set that boundary. And I offer a 30-minute free call for anybody who wants to just ask me any questions or just kind of get a feel for my style, because I find that I've worked with a lot of different people in the past during my journey, and personality and trust was a huge aspect of who helped me and who didn't.
Absolutely.
People who you connect with, people who you resonate with, who have a story that is like, oh, that sounds kind of like me, or she gets it. She's been there kind of thing. And so I offer that just for people who just want to like get to know me a little bit and ask whatever they want to ask. So yeah, you can find me on my website. I'm also one of the moderators of the Tell Me About Your Pain Facebook group, which was originally started by Alan Gordon a long time ago. So I find a lot of people through that. People ask questions, and I'm one of the people who types up the answers. So people can also reach out to me there. But
Okay.
in
All
terms of
right.
other questions for you, I'm curious because have you ever had neuroplastic symptom? Because I feel like you talk a lot about it, but I don't know if I've ever heard you give a personal story about
Yeah.
a
My
neuroplastic.
personal story is that I've never had this, and I
Wow.
grew up in a very supportive home situation. So I started in this work from absolute ground zero of knowing nothing and was introduced to it in my 8th year of formal medical training back in the 1980s when I encountered a patient I didn't know the first thing about diagnosing or treating. And this was a woman in her late 30s who had a severe gastrointestinal problem, which is my specialty. And I sent her to a psychiatrist because she had a history of child abuse. And I didn't think there would be anything that would come of that. But when I ran into the psychiatrist 3 months later in the elevator ride that changed my career, she told me that she had cured this patient with less than 3 months of weekly counseling sessions, which absolutely shocked me. And I learned the basic framework from her because I thought if I'm going to be a complete doctor, I should know how to do this. And it shocked me again when I found 5 or 6 patients a week in my practice. So, which was, 2/3 of my practice was regular gastrointestinal work, but a third of them had neuroplastic symptoms, and nobody else was diagnosing or treating this condition. So I just took it on myself to try to help people with this. And now I'm 7,000 plus patients that I've successfully diagnosed and treated. But yeah,
Well,
because I
that's
never had it
incredible.
myself, I didn't have
That's
any
incredible because you
insights.
speak with such compassion and understanding when it comes to this work. So it's just, I find it like even my husband who understands, I find it hard when you haven't experienced it to understand what it's like to be in it. And I feel like you somehow have bridged that gap. Because
Well,
I
it
feel
helps
like
to have
whenever I hear,
7,000 people
yeah,
tell you about their lives. I
true,
would say
true.
my learning curve, the biggest part of my learning curve was the first 5 years, which would be about 1,500 patients. And that was when it took that long before I finally felt like I had a decent idea of what I was doing. But I'm still learning to this day.
Yeah, we all are, definitely. Every client teaches me something for sure. But I just find that incredible because whenever you speak, whenever you talk about this stuff, it comes from a place of compassion and understanding. And I found that difficult to get at without having experienced it myself. So
Well, my
that
patients
truly,
are my heroes. My patients have carried burdens of stress that I compare to an Olympic weightlifter carrying 50 pounds more than the world record for their weight class, or, a marathoner who goes out and runs 2 marathons back to back. My patients are remarkable people, and I can only try to help them as best I can. The changes not only in their physical health, but also their ability to be successful in the world is remarkable. That this work leads to changes not only in how people experience pain or illness, but also in their relationships and the way they live their lives. And it's just tremendously rewarding to see those changes.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I mean, I try to somehow shift the perspective of like you have this super strong mind body connection and it's gotten you to this place that feels terrible, but it's also a superpower. And if you can just shift the way that you're responding and the way that you're using it, and then it's absolutely possible to unlearn all of that and kind of
Yeah. They are a
use
form
it
of
as into
communication.
your. So yeah,
Yeah, the
exactly.
mind is trying to communicate with you by means of these symptoms. And once we can comprehend the
Learn to
message it's
listen.
trying to send, exactly. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ty. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.